So Nick Kelly and his wife Lucy farm with their parents Malcolm and Kathy Kelly in Newdigate on their 1,450 hectare Hollands Track farm. They have around 3,000 laying hens as well as farming beef cattle. In an attempt to address soil constraints and chemical and fertiliser use, they started experimenting with summer cover crops and are in the process of establishing a diverse subtropical perennial pasture base across the farm. This has led to a natural progression of a no-kill perennial pasture cropping system and a holistic grazing of livestock. The laying hens bring in a diversity, a natural source of fertiliser and an opportunity to cycle nutrients by feeding grain grown on the farm, so having a complete circle. During their quest for information, they have formed the Wheat Belt Integrity Group, we all know that as WIG, to share ideas and promote regeneration of farming landscapes. So I would like to invite Nick to come up and talk to the crowd.
Thanks very much. It's a real honour and privilege to be invited to speak to you today. I'll just give you a little bit of background around Hollands Track Farm. If you draw a line between Perth and Esperance, we're somewhere in the middle, probably about 150 kilometres from the coast as the crow flies, and we're in about a 12-inch rainfall, give or take. And many years ago, when we started down this regenerative farming journey, these were some of the 5 soil care principles that we adhered to. We're getting a little loose around the zero tillage at the moment, and that's a whole different story which I won't go into. But these are the principles that underpin what we do on Hollands Track Farm. As David mentioned, we got into multi-species cover cropping and addressing soil constraints with, rather than using cold hard steel, we went after plants to do that job for us. This is a tillage radish. A lot of you would have seen this before. And we still have plenty of soil constraints. As you can see, most of that plant is actually has been above the ground rather than below the ground. So we've got plenty of issues to address. Years ago, we went away from a conventional fertiliser regime, and we started to make our own fertiliser, if you will. We started making our own compost and adding value to that with composting worms. And we started to use these as foliar sprays and liquid inject our own products that we were making on farm, and we were adding fulvic acids and humates and fish and kelp and other inputs as well. And we started, back in the 90s, we started investigating how to cover the landscape in summer, because we're typically a cold, wet winter and very dry and hot summer. Last summer we had 6 months with 0 rainfall. That's slightly unusual, but it does happen from time to time, and that's the reality of the environment we live in. So learning how to keep that landscape green all summer long, it was quite a challenge. When we started doing this, we had a string of quite wet winters, which suited us perfectly, and we started experimenting with what would grow in our environment. What that was white French millet, and that did very well for us, and we ended up growing that as a cash crop. This is a winter multi-species cover crop. We still grow a lot of these. At that stage, earlier on, we were feeding this to, we were grazing this mainly. Now this is a big part of our farming enterprise. We actually harvest these for grain as a multi-species cash crop. As was mentioned, we've closed that nutrient cycling gap to a large degree, and most of our grain goes back through our own enterprises to value add and to close that loop on farm. 2015, I was inspired by photos of this because we'd been typically growing annuals in our system, even though we live in a perennial landscape. Our bush is mallee scrub generally, with some salmon gums and deep-rooted perennials. And so I started to research the subtropical perennials for our landscape, realising that if I had a summer with zero rainfall, then my summer annuals, my subtropical annuals, were probably doomed to fail. They might grow to a degree, but you might not call them a success. And in 2015, I went down this path. I did a fair bit of research, and I was told that subtropical perennials wouldn't grow in our environment because it was too cold. And there was a whole host of reasons anyway. That was enough for me. I got going. This was my my first crack at doing a perennial pasture cropping experiment. 2015-16. This is a combination. This was also my first adventure into an organic system as well. Cropping lupins, a mixture of lupins and vetch straight into a perennial pasture stand, and it went quite well. This is harvesting that. And what I really loved about this was when I took the top off, I had a green stand of perennials underneath. So we've got Rhodes grass and panic grass, and there's lucerne and chicory and all sorts of things in there. We'd come out of probably a 20 to 25 period of zero livestock, a total cropping system. It had been the full chemical operation. And this was a far cry. This was a long way from there, and it was about this time I realised that we needed something to eat all this. Just threw that in there. This was actually at the end of that 6-month period of no rainfall at all, and we still had green feed. So really no feed gap on the farm. We could still feed our livestock. This is a recent photo. So we jumped into cattle. I didn't know anything about cattle. We'd traditionally been wheat and sheep farmers, and we were running between 2,000 and 3,000 merinos. So it just made sense to get into cows instead. And I just wanted to bring a little bit of the practical elements of jumping into an enterprise like this. In my broadacre cropping wisdom, I'd ripped out a lot of our fences, so our paddocks had turned into 300 and 400 hectare paddocks. So lack of infrastructure for running animals. We have some dams, but I really wanted to understanding some holistic management techniques. I really wanted to narrow down the areas that our animals were having access to for maximum impact over a short period of time, and adopting Savory's techniques of timed management, small areas, lots of tonnes per square metre, and moving them on. So an old Inter truck with a 10,000 litre tank, a poly trough, some Gallagher wire and some Kiwi Tech tread-ins, and we were away basically. So, and we did a bit of trading of cattle. We bought some bits and pieces, and we also were running our own breeding herd alongside this. There you can just see an example of an old IBC, some tread-ins, some wire on a trailer, and we were able to fence very large areas in a very short space of time and manage those animals. And as long as I could get a reasonable earth in summer in our dry environment, we could contain most of our animals most of the time. This is our core, the beginning of our core breeding herd, which we got into alongside some of the cattle that we were trading at the time, and this has turned into a nice little herd at the moment. One of the other practical elements, if you've got a lot of animals drinking out of a trough of that size, and it starts to get low, they start dragging it around the countryside. And so a hot wire just placed strategically across that can really stop the shenanigans. But after a while, they start to take turns, and you can really start to manage their behaviour. I just like them. So after implementing this kind of grazing management over a period of time, all sorts of things start to turn up. So we had dung beetles turning up, which perhaps were there in small numbers. I'd never really noticed, but now it was evident. They were popping up everywhere. Other strange animals started popping up. We had been away and got home. This is certainly not one of ours. And I was pretty sure that the neighbours didn't want it. That's what happened to that. And another example of some of the diversity of the insects that were turning up in a landscape that we needed soil amelioration, and these things were starting to do that job for us. These are actually just blowing up to a degree. These spiders are turning up on the tops of the tredians, and they were just everywhere. So we just had masses of spider webs and insects just turning up all over the landscape, which was really exciting to see. Just wanted to touch on another aspect of grazing and how it's changing the landscape, and how it's making use of a perennial pasture, which is, I guess, everything goes hand in hand. It's part of the whole picture and part of the whole system. I guess for us, there's no real point in having a nice perennial pasture, and there's no point in having animals if I can't feed them. This is part of the hen enterprise, and this is probably the end of May, and or during May sometime. What you're looking at there is after summer we have a little bit of moisture, and this is the subtropical perennial stand, which is growing on a large part of our farm now. We've still got more hectares to incorporate, but we can keep green feed for hens, which is really, really important in our environment because it's very brittle and it's very hot, and it's very dry. So to get humidity up to a degree and to help keep these birds hydrated, which is so important for egg production, those perennials, they play a huge role. These animals are also probably the most brutal animals I've seen on the landscape as well. They could turn that into a desert. At any time, there's 2,500 to 3,000 or more in the landscape, and as you can see there's no fences at all. I can control their movement just by moving their houses, but you do have to keep them moving, and they do tick that box. Very high impact, short space of time, huge regeneration. So that's now similar. That's only metres away from the photo that was taken before, but what you're looking at now is annuals rather than perennials. So they'd finished those perennials. It's now later in the season and it's cooler. Those subtropical perennials are dormant, and they've also been chewed off almost to ground level by those hens. And that's where the hens were concentrated, and they've been moved on from there, and in a matter of weeks you can see the density of the recovery, and most of that you're looking at there is ryegrass. So they do have the capacity to really regenerate quickly and have a really nice flush of grass after they've moved on. There's another patch, and you can see where they've gone. You can see the journey. You can see further up the landscape. You can see another big flush of grass where the hens have been moved. So a great way of fertilising, and of course putting our own nutrients back through that system as well. We're just getting that coverage back out over the landscape, and we can move it to wherever we want to regenerate. And this is a multi-species cash crop. If you zoomed in, it would be similar to the photo I showed earlier with field peas and lupins. vetch, cereal, rye, wheat, barley, oats. There's quite a diverse mix there, and this is on the corner of a paddock which is like a beach. It's just very white sand. It's very gutless. There's been no inputs at all except seed in this instance. There's been no compost, no fertiliser at all. But you can see where the animals have been. You can see the impact, the direct impact, and they were only there probably a month or two before that crop was sown. So they can be strategically placed where you have really sandy soil or that kind of thing. So a really great tool for managing the landscape and regenerating it and getting things to grow. As David mentioned, I'd encourage you to check out the Wheat Belt Integrity Group. It's a group that I chair. We have our meetings in Parliament House, and we have the ear of politicians. So we're talking about regenerative farming all of the time. When we first went in there, they thought we were crazy. Now they're starting to listen, and they're starting to understand that we're not so crazy, and that there is real merit and benefit in what we're talking about. It's free to join, it's free to become a member. It's a 5-minute process of signing up, and you're not bombarded with emails or with too much to read, but you do get the heads up on important events, field days, etc., that kind of thing if you join up. And of course the website has a whole lot of resources, from holistic grazing to world events that are significant in this space, regenerative farming. Thank you very much.